So, 1 Peter chapter 1. We switch gears a little bit here this morning in our study of time management to perhaps what you envision this study to be. That is on holy time, the importance of spiritual time. And we plan to spend the next 4 or 5 Sundays, counting this one, on this idea of what I just simply call holy time. And of course we sing that old song, Take Time to Be Holy. And a lot of this is geared around that song, some different phrases within that song. So you may have to go back in your minds to generation ago to some degree, to that old song, Take Time to Be Holy. And as we think about that, the various areas of study there would be, starting this morning, talking about the need for it. We would then look at things like the benefit of it, ending up with some how-to kind of things. And so that's kind of where our study's taking us the next 4 or 5 weeks is, what is the need for holy time? Why is there a need for holy time? What is the benefit? What do we gain from it? What's its significance? Why should it be important to us? And then, how do we do it? How do we, that's the practical element of it, of how do we find time, make time, use time in the area of holiness, in the area of spirituality. And so, as we think about those things, perhaps this is what you have been looking for, and hopefully this will be helpful to you in a variety of ways. If you have your sheet of paper, the front side is the outline for this morning. The back side is, Alan Webster has a pamphlet. I wouldn't call it a tract, I'd call it a pamphlet. It's several pages, pretty thick little dude, and it's entitled Church, Why Bother? And I would recommend all of the tract to you, but what I have on the back is I just ran a copy or two of some different columns. It's 8 or 10 pages, 8 or 10 columns throughout the whole pamphlet, but I just want you to see these various columns that I've run off here. On the far left-hand side is how the pamphlet begins. On the significance of going to church. Why do you go to church? What's the importance of church? And then part 2 of this pamphlet, in the middle there, deals with Bible class. What's the significance of Bible class each week? And I encourage you to read these 3 columns. It won't take you long. And then at the very end of the 3rd column, the far right-hand side, I attend Bible class because. Now, I cut it off right there. He goes on in the pamphlet to give you 4 or 5 reasons that he gives you of why to attend Bible class. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to fill in that white space for you. If you want to see the pamphlet, you want to read it, then we'll get you a copy. There's 2 or 3 over in the office. But what I want you to do, that's your homework for this week, is in that white space down there, I want you to give me, not that you're going to give it to me, but I want you to analyze and think to your own self and analyze your own spiritual life. Why do I attend Bible class? I attend Bible class because, and list 2 or 3, 4, 5, ever how many you want to list there, but fill in that space after you've read those 2 columns to think about what he's saying and the importance of worship time and the importance of Bible class time. And so the whole pamphlet is Church, Why Bother? And so it's about holy time. It's about spiritual time and the importance thereof. And so as we begin this morning to talk about the need for holy time. 1 Peter chapter 1, if you were here, what's it been, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, we studied from 1 Peter chapter 1 and focused in on this idea of holiness. Well, if you were not here, I'll take you back to 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning in verse 13, and remind you that there is a preparation here. If there is going to be holy time, and if we are going to be able to grow spiritually, there is a preparation that is necessary. It does not happen incidentally. It does not happen haphazardly. There is a plan, there is purpose, there is preparation, and then there is execution. And that is the only way that holy time will be accomplished. Now, the immediate question I would ask is why? Why? Because you and I are by majority here, we're children of God. We're spiritual beings. As 1 Peter chapter 1 ends there, verse 22 and following, enjoying the purification of our souls. By obedience to the cross and the blood that Jesus shed, we enjoy purification of our souls. And we go on to realize that by 1 Peter chapter 1, we're going to endure forever like the word of the Lord. That our flesh and humanity is going to pass away, but we're going to endure forever. We know all this. We understand that God desires us. He wants us to be His children. He loves us. He wants to save us. So why would it be so hard for us to plan, prepare, and execute holy time? Well, obviously, there could be many answers, and you'll have to answer for yourself, I guess. But, Cameron, if you will, take a few right back there, please, sir, so they'll have an outline. Thank you, sir. Here's my biggest concern when it comes to holy time. You and I, by nature, are accountability driven. That's just how we are. Call it responsibility, call it accountability, call it whatever you want, whatever word you want to use. Task driven. In other words, what I mean by that is that humanity as a whole in today's society is deadline focused. So I'm doing a lot of study right now on how we react within deadlines. And what I'm trying to figure out, and I'm thinking that for the majority of humanity, the closer a deadline gets, the more preparation we put on whatever the deadline is. Now, I'm trying to find statistical data to back that up and various things in the world of statistics. But what I mean by that is that when we know that accountability's coming, right? We know that a boss is coming, a CEO, a higher up from corporate office, or when we know that those times are coming, inventory's coming, or productivity assessments coming, or whatever the case is, when we know those things are coming, here's what I'm convinced. We are more geared toward putting more focus and time into making sure that whatever needs to be done is done. Well, if those people come and they come once a year, then when they go home, guess what? I'm convinced our minds focus more on something else. Because they're not coming back for a year. We don't know when exactly they're coming, but they just left. And so it's not that important right now. But now, we'll keep our calendar in 10 and a half months from now or so, it'll get... All right, so all of that to say this. Raise your hand if you know when the Lord's coming. Well, you, sir, with your hand in the back there, tell us when it is. Everybody looked at him. Ain't nobody got their hand up. Quit looking around. We don't know, do we? We don't know when the deadline's coming, right? We don't know when the account... We know it's coming. I mean, that's That's factual. We know it's going to be there. I'm convinced there's not a person in this room that is oblivious to the fact that Jesus is going to come back. But because we don't have a time and date stamp, and therefore the here and now, we don't have this pressing accountability, responsibility, and so therefore spiritual time, if we're not careful, gets low on the totem pole. I've heard this many times in my life. You know what gets the grease, right? Squeaking wheel gets the grease, don't it? So there's that boss in your ear. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's that supervisor constantly. Have you done? Have you done? Please get done. Please do this. Please do this. And if we're not careful, while I'm not asking you to neglect your job responsibilities, but if we're not careful, see, there's the squeaking wheel, and we don't oftentimes hear the Lord squeaking. And the Lord saying, Rodney, I need you to spend some time with me. Rodney, your heart and your soul needs some feeding. Rodney, your spiritual journey is off track and you need to get back on track. Rodney, you're spending way too much time doing other things that matter little in eternity when you're ignoring some very important things that matter a lot in eternity. And unfortunately, because the Lord is not standing right in front of us, literally, then that's kind of like, well, okay, we'll just push that down. It becomes a lower priority. For some people, it becomes a last resort, you know. If I don't have anything else to do, then I'll read my Bible. Well, there's something wrong with that picture, ain't there? Nothing wrong with reading your Bible, please do. But it's almost like it's a last resort, you know. If I can't find something else to do, then that's when I'll read my Bible. And what I know and what you know is that if you're waiting till you have nothing else to do, you'll never make the time to do it. Because you'll always have something else you could be doing. And so, how do we prepare? Verse 13 of 1 Peter chapter 1. How do we get our minds into action and engaged and get that priority set first? Because we know what verse 15 says. But as He who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. As it is written, Leviticus 11:44, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And so the need for holy time. That song that I mentioned, Take Time to Be Holy, first verse says, the world rushes on. Isn't it the case that we live in a fast-paced, hectic, rush society? That song was written almost a century ago, just a few years shy of a century ago, and yet it couldn't be more true for today than it ever has been. We live in a world that's just rushing headlong into everything. I mean, a whole lot of things. And if you and I are not careful, we find ourselves caught up in the status quo, right? And we find ourselves rushing on into, unfortunately for a lot of people, it's going to be eternal separation from God, right? But we're rushing on and life is hectic and activities are constantly coming at us and schedules are full and we're trying to cram in more and it amazes me. It amazes me how much time I spend. You can ask Marie about, I don't know, it's probably been a month ago, how much time I spent trying to find a calendar that would go to the year 2020. Isn't it crazy to think that we are scheduling in the year 2020? Folks, I have things on the calendar right now for the year 2020. This is 2016. That's 4 years from now. And yet, it reminds me of how schedules and how fast, because you and I well know, right? 2020 will be here. Well, you better not blink twice or you'll miss it, won't you? I mean, it's just around the corner. I mean, I know it's 4 years, but it'll be here before you know it, right? If the world stands. And yet, while we do those things, and I certainly can't fault us for doing those things, if I'm at fault, then if you're at fault, I'm at fault because I'm doing them. I'm constantly taken back to James 4. You know what James 4 says. James 4 says, Rodney, you may not be alive tomorrow. You may not live all the way through today. And you know what? That appointment will matter for 2020 if I die tomorrow. Well, somebody will need to call and tell them I won't be there. That's about all it'll matter. Because the reality of it is that we're not promised any time, are we? Now, if we're going to have holy time, we need to recognize there must be a plan and a purpose and an effort to execute put in place. So if we're scheduling all this, when's the last time you wrote down on your schedule holy time? When's the last time you wrote down on your daily planner time with God? You say, well, I don't think I'm going to write that down. If I've got to write that down, then that means it's just really not important, huh? I would disagree totally. I would disagree 100%. If you don't write it down, you won't never do it. If you don't write it down. I got a good friend. I could tell you who he is, and you would know him very well. Think a lot of him, I would hope. I got a mentor in the ministry. Lives not far from here. I called up to the office at the congregation one day. And the secretary answered the phone, and I asked for him. And she said, he's not able to talk right now. I said, is he okay? She said, oh yeah, he's fine. He's fine. I was thinking health-wise, he wasn't able to communicate. He's not able to talk right. Well, is everybody else okay? Yeah, everybody else is okay. Ma'am, I'm really confused. She said, well, sir, he's in the building. He's just not taking phone calls. I said, okay. I said, well, when he gets through, would you ask him to call me? So when he calls me, I said, bud, you must have been in something pretty important. He said, I was studying for Sunday. Wow. Studying for Sunday. I ain't got time to talk on the phone. I'm studying. Now, this person has said in his, whether he's got it wrote down on his calendar or not, I don't know. But he said to himself, for this hour or whatever, this is all I am doing, no interruptions. And I don't know how often he does that. Maybe daily, at least weekly. Maybe a couple times a week. So I'm asking you and I, is it that important to us? All interruptions gone. Cell phones, leave them on the counter. House phone, don't answer it. Go outside where you can't hear it. Leave cell phone in the house. Spend time. Because life is fragile. We know that. Life is fleeting. Life is passing by quickly, and there is nothing. There is nothing that we can do to get it back once it's gone. And if we're not careful, it'll slip away from us, and then it's gone. And we think about, wow, what potential today had, and I just didn't have time today for God. Or I didn't have time today for spiritual time, holy time, spiritual growth, devotional time, whatever you want to call it, personal reflection time. Put it on your calendar. And don't let anything get in the way of that. Because if you're not careful, a day will go by, a week will go by, a month will go by, a year will go by. Right through your fingertips. And it'll be gone. You know, it amazes me, and there's some very unfortunate events that happen in our world, right? But it amazes me what stops us on a dime. Now you think about this. We live in a fast-paced, hectic world. I mean, schedule, from can to can't, from daylight till dark. It's all, everything's got to be fitted in and plugged in and slotted in. And then something like a hurricane comes. Completely out of your control. Nothing you can do to stop it. And the emergency management people say, leave your house. We don't know when you're going to be able to come back. We don't know what you'll come back to. Very likely you won't have any power when you get back. Can you imagine the millions of people's that lives stopped on a dime just this past week? And could you imagine for a moment saying, you know what, Lord, I ain't got time for this hurricane to come. I got a lot of things I got to do. Well, you probably one of them that's either floating over there or perhaps died, right? There are some things in life. I think about my good friend Slater back there, and I think about his grandson, who's home now and doing well, and thank God he is. But we had several conversations about how something like that just stop you on a dime, right? Why does it do that? Well, it does that because we recognize there are things more important than my schedule at that time. But unfortunately, it takes something very unfortunate or very catastrophic to do that to us, because normally we're just go. And it's not until, and so my fear is this. My fear is that something catastrophic will happen to me. Like, for example, I will hear a trumpet and I will see the clouds opening. And I will stop on a dime, won't you? And I don't want to be saying, uh-oh. What's important now? You see, all these other things in my schedule and my calendar, you can throw them things in the garbage, right? Life will stop on a dime at that point. I don't know when it is. It may be 2020. It may be many years after that, or it could be a long time before that. Here's what I know. I know that holiness takes time. You don't just wake up and be holy. It just doesn't happen. You don't just snap your fingers or sprinkle fairy dust and boom. You don't just decide one Sunday, hey, I am going to become a Christian and I'm going to be obedient and I'm going to be baptized into Christ, and man, that's just going to solve. I'll be holy from that moment forever. Now, you'll be forgiven. You be washed, you be cleansed, but holiness is a process. Sometimes in your Bible you read the word sanctification. That's a big $5 word, ain't it? Has a beautiful meaning. It means that God is working on you to help you get to where He is. Sanctification. He is working to sanctify you, that is to make you holy, to set you apart, to create in you a new person, and that is a process. Holiness takes time. Just like being good at something takes time. Just like being a good employee takes time. Just like being good at a card game takes time. You have to practice. You have to prepare. You have to go into it with purpose. When you sit down at a card table with a deck of cards, you don't just sit down to have a good time. You sit down to focus and to strategize, and if you do that enough, you will become a good card player. Same way with holiness. If you go into work in the morning with the attitude and the desire to be the best employee you can be, and you do that Monday and you do that Tuesday, and before long you'll realize that And so will your company, hopefully. That you are a good employee, honest, integrity, hardworking. Honest day's pay for an honest day's work, and you desire those things. If you're going to be, and I'm going to be, what we ought to be as a Christian, it takes focus, purpose. Well, I'm just going to have a good time, and boy, I hope all this falls in place, don't you? Well, I'm just going to live life, have a good time. I'm going to do the best I can do, and when I come across a Bible, I'll pick it up and I'll read it a little while, and I'll set it back down. Maybe you ought to put several around your house so you'll come by them pretty often, right? If that's your kind of mentality. My point is that you're not going to be holy by just stumbling on it. There's going to have to be a daily, not weekly, not Sunday only, not bi-weekly, right? Holiness don't happen on Sundays and Wednesdays only. It's daily. It's a daily pursuit. Hebrews 12 and verse 14. You know the context there of Hebrews chapter 11 and all of those people who lived by faith and who served well and who died looking for a homeland and all of that in Hebrews 11. Hebrews chapter 12 then begins with this whole idea of discipline and instruction and reproof, and those whom the Lord loves, He chastens. So there's a chastening, there's a discipline aspect of this. Those that the Lord loves, He's working on, He's molding, He's challenging. There are trials, there are difficulties, there are valleys. God is using all of that to help this person, to help you and I. Holiness is hard work. And God is working with us as long as we are working with Him. And at the end of that context in verse 14, strive for peace with everyone and for holiness. Strive for holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Strive. What does that word mean there? Strive. Making a constant effort, daily, devotion. I'm telling you that if you and I don't plan for holy time, if it's not our goal and our desire, if holiness is not the characteristic that is first on our priority list, you got all of these other priorities and all these other responsibilities, and if they surpass or override the priority of being holy, it can go all the way to the bottom. At which point you find yourself being very, very unholy, unrighteous. It's a pursuit. It's a striving. It's a longing for holiness. In Romans chapter 6, interesting context there, beginning in about verse 15, about how you use your members, how I use my members. That is our bodies. Do you use your members to be slaves of righteousness? Or do we use our members to be slaves of unrighteousness? Romans 6 is that whole contrast there about you get to choose. You can be a servant of the Lord or you can be a servant of the world, of the devil. You can be a slave to righteousness or a slave to unrighteousness. But be advised that there is no middle ground here, right? The Laodiceans were trying to straddle the fence there in the book of Revelation. Remember that? They were lukewarm, and God wasn't pleased with that. So Romans 6, you pick, but realize that there's only two options. Well, I want to be a slave of righteousness, some of the time and slave of unrighteousness some of the time. And I want to pick and choose when I get to be what I want to be and what days and what times and what situations and what circumstances. And it doesn't work like that. Romans 6 and verse 22, the end of that context. But now that you have been set free from sin, really verse 23 kind of ends that paragraph. But now that you have been set free from sin and have become slaves of God, the fruit you get leads to sanctification, and its end is eternal life. There's that big S word, sanctification. In other words, there's a fruit that comes with holiness. There's a productivity that comes from a life that understands its need for holy time. And obviously, Paul writing to the Christians at Rome, to the saints at Rome, Romans 1, verse 2, to the saints there at Rome, and he's saying to them, you had a choice, and you chose wisely. Now, as having been set free from sin, having become a slave of righteousness, a slave of God, using your members to serve God, there is fruitfulness. Fruitfulness leading to this process that I mentioned a while ago. This process of sanctification that ultimately ends right where we want to end, right? Eternal life. It's a process. Holy time is a process. I don't know what you expect from this class, and maybe in a couple of weeks from now when we get more to a practical thing, maybe we can talk some more about what this looks like and how we can do it. Here's the point. I could stand up here and say, listen, you need to take 10 minutes every morning and spend time with God. The reality of it is that for some of us, we need 30 minutes. For some of us, we could really use an hour. For some of us, perhaps 10 minutes. And I'm not saying anybody's any better off than anybody else. My point is just this. Some of us can take 10 minutes and really focus and be productive and then meditate on that the rest of the day. Where some of us, it'd take an hour because we've got to redo every 10 minutes for an hour what we've done in order for it to internalize. We're just all different. We're all different learners. Here's the other thing. Some of you have to be at work at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. The reality of me standing up here and saying, hey, listen, you need to take 10 minutes every morning. You may be saying to me, listen, I have to get up at 4 o'clock just to get to work on time. 10 minutes in the morning. So then I would say, well, you need to take 10 minutes every evening. You see how many classes this could take? And at the end of the day, I may miss you. You know, you may work till 7 or 8 o'clock at night and you get home dead dog tired and you say, you don't understand, when I get to the shower and to the bed, I'm out. Well, maybe you need to take 10 minutes at lunch or 30. My point is that for me to stand up here and try to say, here's what we need to be doing is impractical. So what are some broad principles? Well, the broad principle is you need to be pursuing holiness. You need to be desiring sanctification that comes through planning with purpose and preparation so that we can execute whatever works for your life. 2 Corinthians 7, let me finish right here, please. 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 1. Since we have these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from every defilement of the body and spirit, bringing holiness to completion. That's what we're trying to do, bringing holiness to completion. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 1 Peter 1 and verse 16. I hope that somehow this week your holy time is blessed and improved.